broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Michael, would you check your sound?
Okay. Good morning. Okay. I just love to talk on mute, you know. It's really hearing oneself talking. Anyway, uh, uh, we welcome you to the 78th. See that if I didn't have somebody watching over me, you see what had happened there? Okay. I just go on happily talking to myself for the entire session. All right. Anyway, this is the 78th Dissipation of Glamour program, and we're into the academic reading as well of the entire book, as DK calls it, a little treatise on glamour. We want to kind of invite you to participate tomorrow morning in our Ask program for the Soul of Nations. We do have an interesting thing happening. There's a meeting here of Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump here in Finland, sort of in between, and that's coming up. So I think that Tuija will be leading a meditation on that matter. It seems important. A lot of the international relations events that are occurring at this time, as they are potentially upsetting the world balance, or hopefully if we work properly interiorly, we will be able to correct or help correct some of that. I also want to say that let's see if I can find it here. Blah blah blah. Okay. Here are some first initiation. Yeah, that's the first initiation. Maybe something else is coming up. One of one upload. We do have, anyway, at this link which I've given you, 7 new programs on a treatise on white magic for the emotional plane. So I hope I put the correct link for you in the chat box, and if I've failed to do that, just go to Moria Federation Esoteric Education on YouTube, and you'll be able to find those. We've had a fair number of people come in and try to work along with the treatise on white magic. Also on the Makara website, which is www.makara.us, like USA, US, we have 50 programs there on the rules for the mental plane, and also the introduction to the book White Magic. So we're making our way through this most necessary treatise. I think that those are the announcements that I have for the moment. I may be forgetting something, but it'll come back to me before long. Okay, let's see here. Okay, right. Well, as I say, you can find this, and if you want to take advantage of it, they are programs about an hour in duration, not going too long, hopefully. All right, now we are going to begin our work on some page or other here of this book. We're not very far into it yet. How far are we into the book? Page 22 or 23, something of that nature. No. This is page 35. Okay, and he begins with some questions. And so we'll have a little bit of a meditative attitude in the beginning of our consideration this morning here anyway. In the United States, I know it's quite, for most of the time zones, very late. But then when we work at night here, it'll be better for the Americas. And, you know, we're doing our best to give everybody the proper service. And you can always tune in on these when they're posted on Makara and some on YouTube. Okay. All right. So there are three further questions which you might put to yourself facing the issue in the light of the soul. All right, now let's look at what they are. So we'll just develop a meditative attitude, and we've said a bit about glamour, illusion, and Maya, and the distinctions between them. Okay. Do I suffer primarily from glamour or from illusion? Now let's just think that over just a little bit. Do I suffer primarily from glamour or illusion? Now think about the ways that you psychologically may suffer and may distort the truth, not see the truth of things in your life. Of course, it's very hard to pick up by oneself, but maybe certain things, because of their effects, have shown you that you are subject to illusion, glamour, or Maya. And so maybe you can answer that question interiorly. Do I suffer primarily from glamour or from illusion? Now remember that the individual glamours are found in lists in Glamour World Problem around page 120, and that you can review these matters when you have the time, because they're very interesting. Right there from 120, we have the different ray glamours. So 120, 122, 23, and so forth. You can review those. Their name is Legion, says the Tibetan. There are so many of these glamours, so many. And he tried to clarify that for people. Do I suffer primarily from glamour or illusion, or some combination of the two, dragging my glamours down onto the astral plane, or my illusions down onto the astral plane, and making glamours of them? That's usually the way it happens, at least for the more mentally focused people. Now, even if the second initiation has been taken, there are still vestiges of glamour, very definitely. And certainly the problem with illusion goes on beyond that. Okay, number two. Do I know which quality or characteristic in my nature facilitates my tuning in on the world glamour or the world illusion? Which quality or characteristic in my nature, you know, it opens the door, so to speak, facilitates my tuning in on the world glamour or the world illusion? And that would be, an important uh, factor to identify, because we all have these open doors based upon ancient habits of thought and habits of desire. And then, when all of that becomes rather predominant, it can be made into the kind of Maya that DK describes and really affect things adversely on the physical plane. Number 3, have I reached the point where I can recognize my the particular dweller on the threshold, and can I state what form it takes? Now remember that dweller, he describes the dweller in this book, and that it's not really taking identifiable form as a whole until the personality is being integrated as a whole with the soul. And so you're liable to catch various aspects of the dweller, certain glamours and illusions that will later be inherent in the dweller, but they don't appear in fullness until we're approaching the 3rd degree, and even after that, they are quite quite present. Even he tells us until the 5th degree. We'll look at that later, which is amazing thought. Anyway, can I recognize my peculiar dweller on the threshold, which sort of the powers of the integrated personality as an inhibitory factor preventing the next initiation? And can I state what form it takes? So let's ponder that. That's a very big one, and none of these questions can be looked at lightly, nor do we have the time right now to go into them, as each one of us must individually. By examining our ray tendencies, we may come up with some fundamental issues here. And when the personality becomes the enemy, as it were, to a higher type of identification, it can be very subtle. It stands at the left-hand side of the door, we're told, and the angel of the presence stands at the right-hand side of the door. And we really do have to identify these personality factors which prevent entry. Now, in a general sense, criticism, who is immune, and suspicion and self-pity. These are great sources of glamour. So just look at, into your life. Suspicion, ray 1, giving way to paranoia, possibly later, if not corrected. Self-pity, the great ray 2 glamour taking many, many forms. And criticism, more along the mental line, and ray 3, ray 5, but if you are becoming mentally focused, criticism is the tendency, and he calls it, as I've said before, and reminded myself and you, criticism, that dire creator of misery. So obviously when DK takes up some difficulty that a student is having, he says something like, well, let me help you analyze your issue or your problem. That is not criticism. Criticism is destructive, and it has for its purpose the reduction of the worth, of the energy, of the presence, whatever, of the one who is criticized. It's a destructive activity. It's a tearing down. Anyway, those are especially the 3 doors of entry to all kinds of glamours. So if the personality and its astral body, let's say particularly, is not filled with love and the light of wisdom, and if there's all kinds of difficulties going on in the astral body, which difficulties may be quite subtle actually, and sometimes they're rather, stressful and obvious. If those kinds of difficulties are going on in the astral body, there is some kind of glamour operative. There are 2 paths in white magic, and a choice confronts the one who meditates. That choice, that's rule 7. It's the very first rule for the astral plane. And we have to decide whether we go off in the direction of the material element and in a way repeat history and become captive to a form of energy which long ago we should have been released from, or whether we go on the right-hand path. And that conflict and what's pulling against the good path will reveal our glamorous. I think when we're ready to relinquish our lower ego and have taken our eyes so obsessively focused upon the personal self, off that personal self, then the way is cleared for getting the astral body into the condition it needs to be as an instrument of service. And there are a fair number of those groups called C groups that do use the solar plexus as an instrument of service. The glamour group does, the trained observers, okay, and the religious group, number 6, and the psychologists, group number 8, they all use the solar plexus because that's where the greatest stress is at the moment for humanity. We live on an emotionally unstable planet because of what our planetary logos has not succeeded in doing yet with respect to his own cosmic astral body. And we ourselves in this transition from the material to the spiritual are much subjected to emotional stress, with maybe, I don't know, I always estimate 80-85% of the people of the world being more emotional than mentally focused. So that says a lot about the effect of demagoguery, appealing to the worst in people through their low emotional desires. We do have a problem, and we've seen how entire nations can be swept by that kind of approach. That's what happened in Germany with its Pisces personality and strong fourth ray. And it's a danger in many places that the worst in man will again arise and temporarily block progress, which only comes from subduing the elemental life. Then DK, he ends this little section, which is important to ponder. He ends it with this statement that you may indeed, as individuals and also as a group, learn the meaning of true self-knowledge, and so learn to stand in spiritual being, increasingly free from glamour and illusion, is the prayer of your friend and brother who has fought his way through to a greater measure of light. He offers no easy way here, as you see. And true self-knowledge is not only the knowledge of the personality, it's the knowledge of the higher aspects of the self, which means we have to have a mind held steady in the light. And when we talk about standing in spiritual being, it's a very high state. It comes from being able to be a channel for the impersonal planetary spiritual triad, because the minute we really enter into the spiritual triad, we have the planetary perspective and not just the individual perspective. And so we actually have to stand in the first aspect, in will, and in something that's even more beingness that we are introduced to as we approach the monad. So it's the highest aspect of our nature. So it's a big demand, right? That you may indeed, as individuals and also as a group, because he's dealing with a group of 9 people here who are meant to be the seed of world work, which may be never started in this particular case, but analogous groups have carried it on, that you may learn the meaning of true self-knowledge, and so learn to stand in spiritual being, because the true self is that spirit point of being, increasingly free, because it doesn't happen overnight, increasingly free from glamour and illusion. And he does use the word prayer, okay, is the prayer of your friend, because we're told that hierarchy is friendship in its truest sense. Your friend and brother, fellow monad, all monads are brothers, who has fought his way through to a greater measure of light. So he invites the struggle. There's just not going to be anything but a struggle for us. Whoop, something happened here. And one of my, yeah, there we go. Someone was taking advantage of some of the programs on YouTube, and it came through as a little A little comment. We all have to learn to think together now, very seriously, in the growing light for these next 7 years, which will not be easy years for humanity. And then maybe we would have done our part and be primed to do even more for the remainder of the sixth ray Piscean age. I tell you what, these things are so important that I tend now to think that rather than simply go on to another subject, I would open the floor to these questions and anything that we may have learned from considering them. Now, remember, we've just had a few minutes, maybe 15 minutes to think about these things, and that's not enough. These are issues that have to be taken into meditation over a period of months, I would say, and even days would help. So we actually see our not self, which is the personality self in a way, and the lower personal self, and see that in relation to the higher pairs of opposites, which is the soul consciousness, which is liberated love and light, regardless of what our ray may be. So we have to see these things, and we have to know what open doors unwise habits of thought and feeling have created over the centuries and even millennia. Remember, glamour has been around a long time, and the chances are that there's really none of us who have not been through the Atlantean period, the majority of it. Even if we were individualized on the moon chain, the way more advanced discipleship groups tend to have been, we would still have entered the Atlantean period millions and millions of years ago and had many hundreds and probably some thousands of incarnations. So we have experienced the very depths of what glamour can mean in the Atlantean civilization, which was definitely an emotionally polarized civilization. The Moonshane people maybe came in on the third subrace, the number 3 being significant, of the Atlantean root race, and have been with us ever since. So whether you were individualized 18.5 million years ago in Lemuria, or were an import, as it were, from the moon chain, you have experienced the Atlantean civilization. Only a few imports from such planets as Mercury and Vulcan maybe have come in during the Aryan age. And that's only been really operative for about 1 million years. That's, in a way, the shortest of the root races. So where is that open door? Just assume that we all have it, It can be insecurity, the lack of fulfillment. It can be pride, it can be the manipulative tendency. All kinds of things can present an open door to the inflooding of conditions that we would be better without. And then finally, if that personality is really integrating now, then I think sometimes the complete integration of the personality with the soul doesn't even occur to the 4th degree, but to a great measure by the 3rd degree it is so. And when one is an advancing disciple, or advanced disciple as it's sometimes called after the 2nd degree, then maybe the dweller begins to take shape. So let me open the floor to anyone, and if you have question, I mean, I will go on, of course. We'll see. We'll see how this little discussion goes. If we don't talk about much and need more time to really ponder these things, that's okay. And then we'll just move on to some other subjects, depending on how long we deal with this. But did any light dawn for you when you considered these things? And I do want to, it's a little late in the day here. I think I'm upside down when I started talking without any sound, but Alexandra and Anne and Annette and Antoinette and Bianca and Bibi, Catherine, Clesia, Deborah, Frederick, Gregory, Gretchen, John, Yopie, Karen, Catherine, Lona, Lulu, Lynn, Margot, Marianne, Marissa, Martha, Olivia, Quinn, I think Vietnamese name. Glad to see you here. Risto, Stephen, Tuija and Olivia here, of course. Vera, Winnie, and Zenaidi, and Joe is backing us up and helping us. Want to welcome to you all. And if you have anything to say at this point about our subject, then please either raise your hand, or if you're on the other side, just speak up. And what I mean by the other side, I don't mean beyond the body and on the astral plane. I do mean that you're here and you're an organizer or a staff member, something of that nature. Okay, is there anything you'd like to say? Any discoveries you've made?
From the other side.
From the other side, Joe. Okay.
I found, actually many years ago, that it was very helpful. Later in the book, I think it's around page 222, where DK talks about the challenges based on your ray in relation to, or your dominant ray, to recognizing glamour. Particularly, he starts out with the sixth ray having great difficulty being able to identify the glamour, and also the third ray. And he goes on with some challenges for each one of the rays. That I found to be very helpful in doing the analysis with these first three questions.
Okay, well, that can direct us to that. Well, I don't think right now we'll necessarily get into that, but that's useful, because the sixth ray is the most susceptible, and here it is, the very thing you were talking about, here on page 222, and let's see.
It actually starts a little bit before, he says powerful sixth ray astral vehicles, that whole section about the challenges for the sixth ray, that paragraph.
That's good. That's good. Well, maybe we should actually read that, because it might be stimulating to all of us. Now, the interesting thing, that there's an old saying in law enforcement. My old teacher used to tell me about it. He said, set a thief to catch a thief. Meaning that if you've already been through it and you've reformed, you know all the ways that the one who has to be caught is thinking. So the interesting thing is he had all of these sixth ray people doing the glamour work. It was almost the sine qua non. It was a necessary requirement that they have some kind of strong sixth ray in their nature, because they would have been through it, being now more at the discipleship stage. Group work, I will actually, since you did bring it up, it does have some very important aspects, and we'll deal with it again when we come there. Group work in dissipating world glamour must be handled as will be obvious to you by those who are working at the dissipation of glamour in their own lives and have learned to use, I suppose, the individual formula just given. The majority of those so working are sixth ray aspirants, those who have sixth ray personalities or whose soul ray is the sixth, plus those on all the, and you know, he included one man whose only sixth ray was his astral body, plus those on all rays who have powerful six-ray astral vehicles. Well, what will they be? Probably the emotional vehicle, not the mind, really, not so much, and maybe the brain, the six-ray brain occasionally. These make the most effective workers in the group, but are subject to one major difficulty. In spite of aspiration and good intentions, they are seldom aware of the glamours that control them. Oh, so, okay, this is the problem. You know, I've moved beyond that. You know, I'm not subject to this anymore. And of course, the very thought, such a thought, is an indication that we are. It is exceedingly hard to induce the six-ray aspirant to admit that he is held by a glamour, particularly when it is a glamour of spiritual connotation and of a very high order. In their case, the glamour is enhanced by the energy of devotion, which stiffens it and brings in a quality which makes it most difficult to penetrate. I think we really see this in many believers who have fastened upon certain concrete thought forms for which they're willing to die, you know, because it promises them eternal life in a protected and joyous state. Their complete assurance proves a serious obstacle to clear-sighted work, because that has all to go before the dissipation can be carried forward successfully. First-rate people, you know, and when you use the word people, now, it's not just the personality, okay? A first-rate person, a sixth-rate person can be a sixth-ray or first-ray soul. And even, I recalled when he talked about the path of magnetic work, which is the second path on the way of higher evolution, he talked about fifth-ray people. That is, those whose monads are on the fifth ray. So the word people, person, and so forth does not tell you that he's only talking about the personality. So anyway, first-rate people can overcome glamour with relative ease once they become aware of it as a personality limitation. They're simply willing to impose upon themselves certain states of discipline which other ray types are not willing to impose. Third-ray people are susceptible to it, i.e. to glamour, as are those of the sixth ray, and their devious, twisting, planning minds and the rapidity with which they can deceive themselves and seek often to deceive others greatly hinders their work in clearing away glamour. Now, one of the persons who had the most problem, and we'll be talking about that in a little while, he was a disciple, the only disciple in DK's group, who had not taken the first initiation. And wouldn't you know it, he had a third-ray soul and a sixth-ray personality. What a tough combination, given what has just been said here. But you could pretty well see that things were going to get better for him in future lives. Okay, so they can deceive themselves and often deceive others and get all confused and everybody else all confused, and you cannot see clearly in the light of day. Their pronounced tendency to be the victims of glamour is evidenced by the inability of the third ray aspirant and disciple to convey his meaning clearly by speech. Well, that's how it is in the beginning. And later, DK tells us that if the third ray and the fifth ray are united, the person can become what he calls the master of the pen. You kind of see that in the case of Voltaire and some of the great thinkers of the past, but that's later on in their development. Both these groups must therefore learn to use this formula, and they would greatly hasten the process of dissipation if they would force themselves, this is so interesting, force themselves to speak or write their thoughts clearly. If they would never be ambiguous or deal in half thoughts, innuendo, or suggestion, they should clearly enunciate the ideas with which they may be dealing. Well, the first ray type is certainly willing to do that, right? But maybe not the sixth ray and the third ray type. It goes on here, but I think, as long as Joe, as long as you, oh, it's a wonderful section. All right, we're into it. Let's do it. The seventh ray person is faced with the difficulty of being able to create exceedingly clear-cut thought forms. And the glamours, therefore, which control him are precise and definite, and to him all compelling. They rapidly crystallize, however, and die their own death. Now, here we go, second-rate friends, and I mean those whose personality, soul, or monad, whatever, is on the second ray. Second-ray aspirants are usually fully aware of any glamour which may be seeking to hold them because they have an innate faculty of clear perception. And think about that in relation to your own self. Their problem is to kill out in themselves their rapid response to the magnetic pull of the astral plane and its many widespread glamours. And this is kind of humorous. They are not so frequently responsive to a glamour as to all glamours in a relatively temporary manner, but one which is nevertheless exceedingly delaying in its progress. So they're just immersed in many glamours, but they get over it relatively quickly once they, really apply themselves. Because of their clear-sightedness, Venus and Jupiter are so strong for these people. They add to this sensitivity to glamour, an ability to suffer about it. The secondary types are agonizing their way to the goal. That's what he says. Their ability to suffer about it and to register their responsiveness as a sin and failure and thus delay their liberation from it by a negative attitude of inferiority and distress. When you want to find that inferiority complex on some level, look to the second ray. And they will, of course, whenever you have a recognized, maybe even an unrecognized inferiority complex, there are compensations that a person goes through. They may either recognize these as compensations or just compensate and not recognize they are doing it. And they will profit enormously from a constant use of the formula until the time comes when they are aware of the glamour or glamours, but are not touched by them. Okay. Fifth-rate people suffer the least from glamour, but are primarily the victims of illusion. They have so many parts and pieces in their field of consciousness that they can't get it all together. They see a lot of trees, but no forest. And for them, the technique of the presence is all important because it brings in a factor which the true fifth-rate person is apt to negate and refuse to admit, the fact of the higher self. He feels self-sufficient. They respond so easily and with such satisfaction to the power of thought. Pride in their mental competence is their besetting sin, and they are therefore set in their purposes and preoccupied with the world of the concrete and the intellectual. In other words, so fascinated by the garment of God that God behind the garment is forgotten. But the moment that the angel of the presence is a reality to them, their response to illusion weakens and disappears. Their major problem is not so much the negation of the astral body, for they are apt to, now this is interesting, fifth-rate types, like first-rate types, for they are apt to despise its hold. But they have a major difficulty in recognizing that which the mind is intended to reveal, the divine spiritual self. You know, we've all had relatives and friends and all that who don't believe at all in what we're doing. They just think it's the veriest nonsense. I have a friend since I'm 7 years old. In Berlin, he lives now, and he just thinks I'm totally crazy. And he's a profound fifth ray working in the field of optical engineering, great in his field, but you know, this whole world of the higher self is closed to him. Their concrete mind interposes itself between them and the vision. And remember what a tragedy it can be when the concrete mind becomes a sphere of its own. Now, only one more thing is needed to discuss the fourth ray people who are peculiarly prone to fall into glamour. Now, think about Germany, the most glamored of the Axis powers with its fourth ray soul. Peculiarly prone to fall into glamour and thus to produce a condition which is one of extreme difficulty. I might define their problem by saying they tend to bring their illusions down onto the astral plane and there clothe them with glamour and have consequently a double problem upon their hands. They are faced with a unification of glamour and illusion. Well, I think many of us are, and elsewhere he talks about. They are, however, the group of souls which will eventually reveal the true nature of the intuition, and this will be the result of their illusory, glamorous fight, because the fourth ray is always fighting in the world of appearances. Okay, Joe, that was good. You know, I say, well, we can't get into it, but then, you know, somehow when I see how good it is, I just say, okay, we better get into it. And keep that kind of thing in mind as we work in the earlier parts of the books, this kind of summary that he gives us. And as if to make it more important, I will just put it into yellow, right? Okay. All right, now, some thoughts. I see, Tuija, that you are there and you may be on self-mute, so you want to unmute yourself or speak from the other side. Yeah.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead.
So I was just thinking about this world glamour and in relationship to world leaders. Now when the meeting next Monday is coming with Putin and Mr. Trump, I'm just thinking about how we should be collecting our powers now to work through this meeting and support the Christ entering into the world situations. Even though we are working, so I'm inviting everybody on Sunday. We are going to have this kind of special meditation.
Sunday. What time?
Sunday evening. We have not been deciding the time yet, Michael. But on Sunday we should.
Well, I have to let everybody know because we also have an ask meditation. So will it be substituted for the ask meditation or will it be its own time? We'll have to let you know.
No, it's going to be its own thing. But again, now Trump is meeting and has met in England. So thinking about this triangle, England and or Great Britain, Russia and United States, which is said that the world's or the destiny of humanity is lying upon their hands in these three countries.
Mm.
And that's why the leaders become in huge important.
Mm.
So this clamor which is going on in the emotional plane with all the leaders, we see that the Putin is not showing so much what he is thinking or feeling, but we see in Trump all these tiny little things.
Mm.
He had been tweeting again that how England is a very crude country because they are not welcoming him, that he feels that he is not welcomed. So all of these emotions which are shown by the leader is weakening the whole nation, because the leader is supposed to be the one who can actually hold things in place, and whatever is the personal opinion is the different thing. But in Trump we have a totally new type of leader who is releasing all what is going on in him to the world via the Twitters and so forth, as we know. So thinking about, again, that all these cycles that we have 7 years, it's related to Saturn. So it's like the one arc of or one arm, or how we would describe this.
1/4 of the cycle, you know, of the Saturn cycle.
Yes, and it's very important this last 7 years for all of us to work together and to see that, as DK says, yesterday we were reading from the reappearance of Christ, that you can, just studying the world press, you will see Christ nearing and what is happening in that area. And when we think about what is reported, that kind of clamor, for instance, that it is denied that there is not the global warming by Trump. It is one kind of clamors which is based upon, I don't know what is his ray chart, how much, where he has 6 ray, because he has to have that, and also this 3rd ray.
We know ray 1, ray 3, and ray 4. We know that. We don't necessarily know where they are positioned, but those 3 rays are pretty prominent.
Because he's so idealizing the American in his own ways. So that's why I'm thinking about the 6th ray in him.
Yeah, that too. And well, anyway, that's a subject that sometime we should do, analyzing the rays of prominent world leaders. And I think we would find it very interesting. There's no, well, I don't want to get off on it too much, but there's no question that Putin is a ray 1 soul. When it comes to the president of the United States, we might have to question that and rearrange the rays in a certain manner. Not all people in power are ray 1 souls, even though naturally they have the 1st ray. So sometime let's do that. But anyway, tomorrow we'll just try to let everybody know, Joe, somehow, when that meditation will occur, as soon as we find the best time for it. Go ahead.
Yes, it is on Sunday, not tomorrow.
What time?
On Sunday.
Tomorrow, in the evening.
I'm sorry.
On Sunday, and we have to.
Sunday, and we have to let people.
Yeah, as soon as it's decided, we'll get an announcement out to everyone.
Great.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Excellent. Yeah. Big issues are happening in the world, and they're working out. And but you know, as I've said before, when the Christ is getting ready to reappear, Pluto drags everything to the surface, and Vulcan imposes the spiritual will, and oftentimes at first destructively. So this is what we're dealing with. We're going to see it all, and then maybe the soul will grip humanity more strongly than it has, and each one of us, of course, under the grip or the fist of Vulcan. Okay, Tuija, thank you for your thoughts. Now let's see. We have here a couple of other things. Here's Antoinette, and here's Anne. Thank you, Michael. I've just realized again the importance of friendship and right relations from your comment about the hierarchy. Yeah, friendship in its truest sense. Hierarchy is friendship in its truest sense. And isn't it touching when DK signs off, as he does at the end of, you know, many letters, and he says, you know, your brother and your friend, you know, and then he says, I number myself, he says, as one of the humblest friends of the Christ. Now that is actually a technical term, a friend of the Christ, and it is reserved for those who are on the wisdom side of the second ray, even more than the love side. If you check the group astrologer in those days, his name was William Miller, and I think his initials were D, H, and B, DHB, something like that. DK said he was going through an experience which was preparing him or helping him become a friend of the Christ. So, friendship is a very deep and beautiful thing, and we have to understand what it really is. There's always a willingness to help to the extent that one really can, and without judgment, without an attitude of criticism, a willingness just to see the other person advance, doing the best that you can. All right, and yes, and yes, we'll send the time, as Joe said, by mail for the Sunday meeting. Okay, other things that anybody would like to say here in relation to what we've talked about. Now, actually, Joe gave us a really big hint. It was a wonderful section, really, wasn't it? I mean, great section. And I remember that section very well, and trying to look at myself as a personality and individual and say, well, what am I suffering from here, So it's a good section, plus these questions that we've been addressing. Am I suffering more from glamour or illusion? And what's the open door for me? And the open door, is really funny, but the open door may be the area that you feel most confident about and where your real skills and your powers lie. In other words, it's our virtues and maybe our fixation upon our virtues that open the door to glamour. And that's a strange reversal, isn't it? You would think that there we are safe, but there maybe our motive is so good that we don't see the results of the way we express certain abilities. So don't only look for the bad things, look for the areas where you think you are really strong, and hiding there might be the seed of some maladjustment which prevents you or me from seeing the truth. Okay, other thoughts that you might want to express or other questions? Obviously, I'm not really going to go on with more at this point because it's enough. It's enough. But this little treatise on glamour is going to be eye-opening to so many of us, hopefully if we just stick with it. And this will be the end of Doggy and its 13, and we'll be going on to the beginning of number 79 next time, and it'll be our 19th academic reading, and it will be the 20th of, it'll be Friday the 20th, and it'll be, I suppose, an evening time. So, so before we go on to our meditation, are there, yes, okay, Alex, there you are. And hold on, and there you are. Go ahead.
Yes, hello. Hello.
Hi, Alex. Hi.
Yes, I just wanted to follow what Tuija said. I'm very grateful for the meditation she's holding on Sunday. So I just wanted to say from here in London in the UK, I'm very grateful for everyone's help and for group unity. There's been a big shake-up this week here. So the feeling is that things are shaking. And we don't know which way they're going to fall, but they're shaking. And the situation is that just going back a few days to the World Cup event. We know that sport can be very unifying for people, and it brought up something in this country, a feeling of positivity. There's a very fine man leading the team who's working on mindfulness and positive psychology and kindness. And what this brought up was that people recognize that. People recognize and like decency and truth and honesty and kindness, and it was flashing across the media. So at the same time, that there is this sense that people do like what is good and true. At the same time, we had Trump arrive yesterday, and there were massive, I don't know how much everyone's news reports, but there were massive protests in Oxfordshire outside of Blenheim Palace. Again, they were peaceful. They were decent people. I had eyewitness accounts coming in about how calm and quiet people were, and that what they're saying is, that they are against racism, they are against separatism, they are against misogyny. But again, there was this decency of the crowd. Now, at the same time, the president was flown in such a way that he wouldn't see any of this or hear any of this. And we all had to watch the spectacle of the marching bands and the trumpets and the pomp and ceremony greeting the president, and him being feted by hundreds of business leaders. And I'd love for you to speak about how we're supposed to be detached, watching that. And then at the same time that he was being feted at one of the most famous and golden palaces in the country, he was releasing a statement through an interview, criticizing the Prime Minister, who was standing there greeting him in her evening dress, and saying that because she was offering a soft Brexit, which would suggest ties could remain with the EU, because of that, he said, well, don't expect England and Britain and the UK to have any kind of a deal with the US, trade deal, which is what they're all clamoring for. At the same time, Theresa May's government is collapsing, and you will have heard, about her ministers resigning because they're opposed to her. They're opposed to her suggesting a soft Brexit. So, in other words, she's being told that if you're not going to carry a hard line and break with Europe completely, then don't look to the United States for anything. And so today the blimp is going to fly over Westminster. Again, I expect the protests to be loud but decent. So at the same time, where you have the duplicity at the highest levels, you have this rise of awareness and decency and positivity in the people. And I don't know if that comes across. I don't know if that comes across in the news, but I just know that there has to be this subtle support for the truth that is rising and is residing in the people, but it doesn't get an airing. It definitely doesn't get an airing in the media. And when they say there'll be 50,000 people protesting, there'll be 200,000 people, and they'll be decent. And there is a feeling of not having control, of knowing what's best, knowing what they want, but not having any ability to do anything about it, except speak,
show up
where they can, show up, speak where they can and when they can. And I just feel that it's important for people to know what's going on, and you don't know what impression other people are getting through their media, but there is there's something worth supporting here. There's
Indeed.
something, definitely, there's light trying to shine through all this nonsense and duplicity, and there's a lot of it. And I just don't know, how much, what one can do and how much we can do to
Well,
support that.
groups like ours can do something, because we have given meditations in which the light is always strengthened. The points of light, the points of brighter light, and the light of hierarchy. All we can do something positive along this line. And then what DK tells us is the power of public opinion. And recently we've seen that operating in the United States. There was sort of a horrific thing going on with the refugees coming in from Central America and the separation of the children from the parents, and world opinion, not just US opinion, but world opinion got so incredibly intense that it forced some kind of action against that policy. Obviously, they're trying to get around it and all the rest of it, and it's a very selfish thing. But at the same time, public opinion can be immense. So when these 200,000 show up thinking a certain thing, it will have its occult effect. And we'll see more and more of that because, the lines between the right-hand path and the left-hand path are going to be becoming increasingly clear over the next 7 years, in my view. And we're going to see, really clarity about who's going in what direction. And many people will see it. That's the whole point. The old saying is it all depends on whose ox is gored. But now, we're going to have a lot more gorings going on as the people who promote selfishness are badly affected by the results of selfishness. So, thank you, Alex, because that, you're right there on the spot. You're like those people that are part of the network and they've got the microphone and they're right there.
I'm going to be at Westminster today.
And the blimp, of course. And when the man said, "Oh, I feel unwelcome in London," okay, okay, so be it. The world is lining up to see what is selfish and what is unselfish, and that's part of the Pluto business that we're preparing for that now. So I appreciate your thought.
I appreciate support.
Yeah. You bet. Thank you for the report. And yeah, you bet. Tuija, go ahead. I'm
sorry, I didn't know. Thank you very much, Alex. And I would like to add to this whole question about numbers. So when the masses has to choose their ways, that is one of the things which is related to the reappearance of the Christ. We have to show in humanity what is our choice at the moment. Do we choose that what is the friendship or the brotherhood, sisterhood between and among nations? And at the same time, all the disciples has to remember one thing which is important for us. It is said that the only one person is needed for the change. And that is based upon this magic when we think about that whomever of us is on this side, on the physical plane, has this direct funnel or channel to the higher worlds. And if any one of us is implementing a new thought, a new vision, a new way of going over the reactions, that creates this magnetic point. The more one is meditating upon the certain line. That's why it's very important for us to just study oneself, ask oneself, what are the thoughts? If you are alone and there is nothing going on, you are not in any group work or per se, but what are your thoughts, your continuous thoughts in your mind? what do you develop? Do you develop the uh, the world vision? Do you develop the friendship over the borders? Do you develop the love? Do you develop the understanding? These are the things what we have to study, because that is the energetic flow from us, who we are as disciples.
Mm.
So one person only is needed for whatever
For
particular
the change.
for
What
the
he
change.
says, he calls it one person thinking truth. I looked it up
That's
the other day, and it can have a huge effect. Now, what we need, obviously,
right. And when we
is
think about the masses who
yes,
maybe not consciously um, thinking about building Antakarana or consciously thinking about directives, but if there are among them those who are able to hold their link very strongly with the hierarchy, that is how all these higher powers can work. And
mm,
so in that sense, when we think about Alex, you at the moment being there, and other disciples, we should now very strongly look that triangle between the Great Britain, Russia, and United States, and
mm,
support this work to be done smoothly, and eliminate all of those lower things. Every
mm,
one of weaker leaders, they have the soul, of course, and that is our hope. We have to base upon the hope to the soul qualities of everybody and their soul power. But we must invoke at the moment. That is about the triangle work, that we invoke
mm,
strongly at the
mm. Good points to you. Yeah, these are decisive times, and get ready, friends. It's only going to intensify. It has nowhere to go but to intensify as the lines are drawn between the reactionary forces. I would hardly call them conservative. That's a misnomer. Conservatism should be about preserving what is best, but reactionary is a steady drive, a steady, glamorous drive into a past that never really existed. And every time a nation tries to go backward to capture former glory, it's an open door to glamour and to the presence of the Black Lodge functioning through it. It's worked every time with Italy, with Germany, with Japan. It worked as they drove backwards to recapture the former glory. So we have to be very careful about that mantra that is being used in the United States and spreading around the world: make America great again, make X great again. It's going backwards into the imagining of former glory, which probably never really existed anyway. Okay, friends, I think we are reaching the point where,
You have one more comment,
yeah,
and
yeah, this
question.
looks like it. This is it here. Can you talk a bit more about the second ray and its ability to suffer? How does one deal with the pain? Actually, in esoteric psychology too, he deals with this quite a bit uh, under the law of sacrifice. And it is through Roberto Assagioli, who is such a profound second ray type, second ray astral body, second ray soul, probably second ray monad, I guess, um, came up with this disidentification exercise. But it's really old Raja Yoga at work. It's a pratyahara. It's one of the means of yoga. It's a drawing back from identification with the changing aspects of our own personal nature. We look at them and we realize that we are not those things. We are something else altogether. So it comes with soul identification from a higher pinnacle on the higher mental plane, and disidentification from all of the pains in the world that seem to afflict us. These, DK talks about a certain don't care attitude. Of course, we care very much about the welfare of spiritually of everybody, but there's a certain detachment. The Buddha brought it out too, didn't he? The 5 Ds. I have a talk at the conference, a recent conference about the 5 Ds. And it has to do with discipline on the physical level, dispassion on the emotional level, discrimination on the mental level, decentralization on the personality level, and finally, the general detachment of the soul and spirit. So it's really the ancient methods of pulling back and identifying with what one really is, rather than being invested in all of the many changes on the mutable cross, as if the phenomenal world and what we're going through within it personally is the most important thing, and it's not. So it's an inner ability to detach from the troubles that are found on the mutable cross, inevitably and always. And it's a re-identification with the true aspect of our nature. And all we can do is practice that. We have to practice that. And eventually, who knows what we will discover ourselves really to be. And the second ray, of course, it's in a way the most attached ray. It's so easily identifying with everybody, but then it has the ability really to disidentify, and that's a peculiar thing. And through the power of real love, and this is almost like a paradox, through the power of real love, the second ray disidentifies with the personality and form aspect. So we have to study that paradox and work with it. The sensitivity is good, but the sensitivity applied to the phenomenal world because we desire some condition in the phenomenal world is not good. So practice makes perfect in this regard. Okay, Anne. Right. All right, friends. Well, I think we've spent quite a bit of time on. Okay, Alex, do you have another thing you would like to say?
Yes. I just want to thank Tuija for saying that, because on the one hand, there is faith and hope and courage. And I think, for example, what happened in Thailand, that miracle was, encapsulated the potential of human beings. And that's very inspiring. On the other hand, there is an ancient glamour of reaction and fear. And I find these, playing a part, bouncing back and forth all the time. So what I wanted to ask you was, I've seen this, ancient habit of a reaction to lying. I mean, ever since I was a child, lying. And inauthenticity, or what I would call phoniness, and seeing this so large now on the world stage. Just can you speak about how to handle, the reaction you have to people in high places lying? And and it even gets a reaction from me to see that, all you'll see is these people standing in front of Blenheim Palace, and that president is meeting the Queen today. But what you won't be told is the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who are feeling and supporting the truth and goodness and rightness. And that, that's lying.
Yeah,
And there's a
yeah,
reaction
yeah,
to that.
yeah,
There's a big
yeah.
reaction to that. And as you said, it's going to get worse.
I think we all have maybe our solutions. So something that I might offer will not be what somebody else finds really useful. But I'll tell you what, in a way, the responsibility is, yes, of course, to attack the lie and point it out and have there are X number 3,050 lies have now been told. Okay. But the bigger thing is to think the truth and to speak the truth when, however one can, but especially in the mind,
Yes.
and to align with the great spiritual forces. Now, I have a little meditation that I do. In this case, I'm a fighter. I'm an Aries fourth rate type. So I could get in there and, do all that. But what I do is I visualize, in this case, the indigo soul of America, the great second ray indigo soul, which is eventually to be a humanitarian force in the Aquarian age because it's ruled by Aquarius. And I empower that, and I empower that. And I think of the great leaders we have had, Lincoln, Roosevelt, even Theodore Roosevelt, others who have embodied the principles of the soul of the nation. And I work on so intensifying that presence of the good within the nation that it absolutely, like the Om, throws out the atoms of lower vibration. I don't think I have to say more when I say that. So I strengthen the good. Good draws imperfection, perfection draws imperfection to the surface. It's the ninth law of healing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good drives evil from the form of man and time and space and so forth. So I suggest, obviously we want to take note of all the particulars. And if you're a prosecutor and you're dealing with crime, you have to be very fifth ray about it. And you have to say this happened and this was against this law and this was against this law. But for people of our type, to strengthen the soul of these nations so the very best radiates from them is like sounding the Om. And you can even sound the Om when you're doing it and eject the malevolent atoms. Anyway, that's what I do. And
Thank you.
I think it's useful. I think it's useful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet, Alex.
Thank you.
Okay, and Tuija, you go ahead. Go ahead,
So
Tuija.
shortly, thank you again, Alex. So this whole problem about lie is so deep in the psyche of humanity that it will follow us a long time. Two things about that, what was coming to my mind is some occult things related to Christ, what he was doing in his work when in the story of Easter, when he is stepping down for 3 days and he does that great redeeming work for the whole humanity. The Lord of Darkness, or the Satan, is called the Lord of Lies, and all these lower worlds in putting in the terms of Christianity or Bible is that these lower worlds are ruled by this Lord of Darkness. So this everything is about lie, because people try to lie. And it's interesting when we study about the lie, that why people are lying, why we are lying. We try to escape from the light, that we are not to be seen as we truly are behind the scenes. That's why the lie is spread this way and that way. And it's interesting to study how it is so common knowledge within us that we know what is the correct way to work. And that's why we put the lie as we would be doing that, even though we have not done that. And this is going in every arena in human living, everywhere. So what one can do is, I have been thinking that part a lot, what Christ was doing, and maybe we all could contemplate about that, that in our personal ways, how we will enter into the 3 days processes to do this transforming work. The other thing I want to point out is about what you were saying already, Michael, by sounding Om, is about deity yoga, which is known in the East. When we repeat those high names, maybe we have our own name, or then we can choose whatever greater being, and we repeat those names. They are also redeeming powers. And that's why we should sometimes to study deity yoga, what it actually does, and this repetition of those names.
And I think, yeah, I think in the Blue Rose Sisterhood, that is one of the major topics there, and in many groups in the East. It's sounding the great principles which eject the lower counterpart. It is calling on the antidotes to the sins. See, we have this Satan in the lower respect is the triple personality, and or the devil, it's just all sort of symbolism, but it's the triple personality. And there's a way of saying that the triple personality is the father of lies. We say the devil's the father of lies, Satan the father of lies. The triple personality and the desire of the benighted consciousness to protect that triple personality from the effects of the greater light, that's the lie. And what Restagioli says, look, and many depth psychologists, it's called the repression of the sublime, or the suppression of the sublime. The lunar personality is so afraid of the light that it lies to protect its own darkness. So, we just intensify the light, and it's going to break through, and it's going to break that tendency. We have a lot of occult work to do. A lot of occult work.
Thinking about this, just thinking, let's say Om, that when the lie is set, it creates a certain pattern in the etheric field via the elementals. So these are the redeeming forces via the disciples and those who know. They bring forth these forces to untie these prisons.
The bonds of falsehood, yeah.
If we cannot access directly, first we have to access directly to our own lives. We have to reflect and echo the truth within us. So we all know that the glamour work is about that we would become more and more aware of our weaknesses and liabilities.
Yeah, go ahead.
When those people are sounding, who knows, at least something, then it has a power. And that's why DK talks about that, about disciple, that when the disciple has been working for millions of years and have reached the place where he is standing, so he has much more power in his thinking and in his voice and in his sounding power. So that's why it is looked and waited, expected by the masters, that we are using these occult powers which are related to speech and the words, the sound.
Good points. The Lord of Liberation in Shambhala, who is working most powerfully at this time, is the Lord of Liberation. It's a Uranian Lord, those three great lords of liberation and freedom. And we remember this old statement that we all have to ponder on, that the truth will set you free. and thereby help that Lord of liberation who is working particularly with freedom. See, that's going on today in a big way in our world. Well, thank you, everybody. I think, now we do have to have our little our meditation. Let's see now. Tuija, do you want to do this, or do you, you can do it if you like. I can put it on the screen, or maybe.
Do that.
Yeah.
I have
Okay.
batteries left.
Okay. You want me? No. Are you saying that you would like to do that?
No. Do that.
Okay. 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 Whatever. Okay. All I have to do is find it. Okay. It's in my. I had it here just a minute ago, and Glamour World Problem Formula for the Dissipation of World Glamour. I guess I can read what's called a read-only copy. It's okay. All right. So, we're working on this thing. It's about mistaken identity. It's about taking ourselves for our personality as if we were the personality. And boy, do we see that operating on the world stage. Such a limited sense of identity. It just all boils down to a centralization instead of a decentralization, and it just destroys right relationship. It's a Leo factor, and it's a very primitive Leo factor, this glamour of personality. So anyway, we will do this, and we'll just enter the silence together, at least for a little while here. We're all over the world in time and space, but we're right here together in consciousness. And we'll, as I say, when you do this with your smaller glamour groups and those who may be with you as you get together, maybe on a weekly basis or whatever, you can go through that 10 minutes, 10 minutes of silence. And we'll use the protective formula with the cross of divinity. And we'll see it radiating the protective light for the individual and the group. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. So we're working under the protective cross of divinity in this area, which has the greatest illusion considered in the general sense. Now we focus the light. We lift up the light of matter onto the mental plane imaginatively. It's a vital light. And we combine it with the light of our lower mind, the light of reasoning. so we can think in a vital way. Two lights are one, and then we call upon the light of the soul. We recognize that light as from above and within. And we bring it down, changing the frequency, and it enters into the dual light and creates a triple light. We have the light of the soul illuminating the light of lower mind, the reasoning mind, and all supported from below as well by the vital light of matter. Three are one. And we affirm the light we are creating. It's going to be a light, a beam that is projected onto the astral plane in imagination. It will help detect glamour, and it will help dissipate and destroy glamour. And so we say together, the light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Oh. Then we use the formula. And as we use the formula, we see the searchlight, that weapon, and that beam of revelation amidst the mists and clouds and veils and fogs and miasmas of the astral plane. And so we visualize that as we use this formula. Radiance are we, and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth. the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. And strengthening our beam, our individual beams as they contribute to the formation of the group beam, we say, calling upon the spiritual will with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. Now, let's try, before we enter the words of power, try to understand, as it says here, we bring understanding to the situation. We go into the soul source. And we try to understand, what is this glamour of personality, which is allied to egoism, separatism, centralization of the wrong kind, isolation, friction, war, destruction. What is this glamour of personality? And when we do that, in esoteric astrology, at page 332, you see how the advanced Leo type treats this issue of personality. It's called then the relinquished point. The relinquished point. And so now we're going to use our words of power. We say these aloud where we are. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of personality. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour of personality from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind the glamour of personality. Now we're going to have our 5 minutes of silent meditation as we visualize our beam of light penetrating into this glamour, producing its weakening and dissipation. 5 minutes of silent work. as you work in your own way. But on behalf of the group, it's important to visualize the result, which is, of course, the clearing of the astral plane and its irradiation by love, wisdom, these glamours will inevitably disappear. And when you have a mantram, something, a word of power, either from the Tibetan or devised by yourself, it's important to repeat it 3 times. I won't say more about it, but Moria gives us the hint, and you'll see what I mean. Repeat the mantram 3 times, accompanied by the visualization. So now we withdraw our beam back onto the plane of mind, disengaging from our work on the astral plane. You shut down the searchlight, but we know work has been done, and with confidence, we sound the Om 3 times, acknowledging the work done. And a great clarity and increasing clarity will supervene. Okay, friends, please join us tomorrow in the AM, well, AM here anyway, 5 a.m. GMT, for the work with the soul of nations. You can see how important it is at this time that the soul of nations emerge, and also for our interventionary emergency work, which seems always these days to be necessary. Then on Sunday, attracting money for hierarchical purposes, and we will, the special meditation, Tuija and I have to discuss this, and when seems to be the best time to offer it amidst all the other webinars, but we will offer it. So Olivia, Tuija, and I thank you for attending, and we will proceed with our understanding of occult work and what we can do as occultists in training to help clarify this very turbulent and obscuring world condition, so that consciousness shines forth clearly and beautifully and carries truth. All the best to you. And we'll see you before long. And as I say in the chat box, there's these new programs that are coming out in our sort of ongoing study group, the different books of Alice Bailey. Reappearance of the Christ being read at that meditation. and the Destiny of the Nations being read at the Soul meditation, and Glamour here being read at this meditation. We're going to take another powerful approach to the books, anchoring what we can and preparing for Master DK's next dispensation. All the best to everybody, lots of love, and we'll see you.